So, we are going to talk about the Aboriginal tribes in Taiwan. What you have seen just now was actually two different films on the same topic. The WHEI incident happened 1930, and well, only say since the last decade, the topics of the original tribes became more and more popular. That's why you have the different companies who like to film, kind of make stories about this WHEI incident, which was actually totally neglected for over, say, 3-4 decades. But the WHEI incident happened in 1930. Was only one of the incidents, or one of the major clashes between the Japanese and the Aborigines throughout the colonial time. So Aboriginal issues are actually of great importance, but it is somehow very hard to follow the one certain policy, because first of all, we don't know how many tribes are there altogether. Even nowadays, we don't know how many tribes are there in Taiwan. And some of them, well, we thought they were actually one tribe, but some of them would claim themselves being a separate or independent tribe. Like we used to have the army tribe in Taroko, in Hualien area. Now they are actually counted as three: the army tribe, the Taroko tribe, and another tribe. But sometimes the names are very difficult for us to understand or to remember. Like the Sedeki, that is another tribe, used to be thought as one of the Sao tribe, but nowadays they claim themselves being Sedeki tribe. Some of them would actually, because of the fights between different tribes, amongst the different tribes, some of them actually disguise themselves in the history. So they pretended to be some of the tribes and then just mingled with others in the mountainous area. And because nowadays we have a different policy towards the Aborigines, then they will gradually come out, kind of coming out. Another way of coming out, I'm not the Sao tribe, I'm actually the Sedeki tribe. That's one reason how we don't know how many tribes are there. And the other thing would be the intermarriages. Ever since the Chinese, or say the Dutch, arrived to Taiwan, the intermarriages started between, say, the first recorded intermarriage was actually between the Dutch priests, Dutch soldiers, and the Ma Dou tribe. And when Zheng Chenggong Koxinga arrived to Taiwan, again, because he and his troops actually consist of many young single males, and there's only possibility to get settled down will actually be marrying the local Aborigines. And there's a term, in Taiwanese, we call the wives qianshou, hand-holding. It is said, I don't know whether it is true or not, but it's possible that Zheng Chenggong allowed these soldiers go into the Aboriginal tribes and said, take whatever you see, and just hold her hands, and just, well, kind of robbed the brides. All these kind of things happened throughout the Koxinga's era. When the Qing took over, this similar thing happened. And then the Japanese arrived, as you can see. The Japanese tried to assimilate the Aborigines and asked the police officers who was actually in charge of the Aboriginal areas to marry the daughters, the sisters of the chieftains, so that they can get easy control over these Aboriginal areas. So this intermarriage happened again. And when Kuomintang came along with the big troop, big army, say 2 million young male arrived to Taiwan after 1949, then the necessity of practicing intermarriage forced well, enhanced the intermarriage again. And so sometimes we call those Aborigines who were accustomed or who took over the Chinese culture or the agricultural culture as the Shoufan, or sometimes we call them Pingpu. Shoufan means actually civilized barbarians, and Pingpu means that who living on the plains, not in the mountainous areas. And as for the consistent parts of the Pingpu, it's very hard to say which tribes they were actually originally from. And they adopted Chinese languages. And sometimes they don't even know how to speak their mother tongue. And gradually this became a new culture. Well, it's very similar to the Han Chinese, but their religious practice somehow different. Like they have a very special worship called Tenghu. They use a bottle, and the bottle, they believed that in the bottle the souls of their ancestors live in. And this kind of worship or this kind of religious practice was actually unknown to the Chinese. But besides that, they don't have their own languages. They don't have their own family names. They adopted Chinese family names, and so on. They look somewhat different, but the intermarriage between those Pingpu and the Han Chinese were even easier. And therefore, these Pingpu is somehow very hard to identify. It's very difficult to count the number. So I'm going to name you some figures of the population of the local people, of the Aborigines, but it's only according to the Committee of the Aboriginal Affairs. And even themselves, they don't know how to get exact or accurate numbers. For example, the intermarriage between these Aborigines, it's another type of intermarriage, right? Not like the Chinese and the Aborigines. Say the Sao tribe sometimes married to Ami tribe, and the Beinan tribe sometimes married to Ataya tribe. This kind of intermarriage will cause the same effects on or impact on the cultural development, because they don't have their mother tongue. Sometimes they lost their own identity. But for us, for the Chinese, or for the government, they all counted as Aborigines, 100%, right? Say the intermarriage between Han Chinese and the native, you would consider as 50% of the Aborigines. But as for this intermarriage between themselves, it's 100%. But the loss or the danger of losing their own identity is not even smaller. So it's very hard nowadays to say. But first of all, I will give you an overview about Taiwanese Aboriginal tribes. Well, this is actually a map. It's quoted from the Committee of the Aboriginal Affairs. So this is more or less an official saying or official recognized fact. So this is actually Taoyuan. In the Taoyuan County, there is a special tribe called Saixia. And then that's the Sediki. Was considered one of the CHOU for a long time, but now they call themselves Sedik. And that's the Bunun, or Vanun sometimes. This is in the center of Taiwan. Then that's the Zhou tribe. CHOU tribe is actually based in the Sanmun Lake area. Have you been to Yuetan? Then those, you can see the tribes there are actually CHOU. But the number of the CHOU is really small, especially when the Setiki, they call themselves independent tribe now. It's departed from the south. The number is therefore shrinks again. And that's the Rukai in Taitung area, the Paiwan also in Pindong area. So there's a small tribe on the little orchid island called Yami, right, the Yami zone. And there's the Puyuma. Puyuma is very known of their good voice. There's quite a lot of singers from the Puyuma. Right? And in Hualien, Taitung area, you have the Amis, Yamezu. And you see, right in the middle of this, you can see the Taroko tribe, the Sakizaya tribe, and the Kavalan tribe. They were actually counted. They were counted as the Yami. Nowadays, they became separate, independent tribe. So, and along the coastal areas, there you can find a lot of Pingpu tribe. But nowadays, the Pingpu tribe are not counted of as the Aborigines, because as I mentioned, it's very hard to define the nature or the personality or identity of this Pingpu tribe. Sometimes the blood, you can check. Nowadays, there's a technique about checking your gene, right? Just if you have $12,000 and a drop of blood, you can send it to the Mackay Memorial Hospital. There's a special, there's a group that can tell you where you're from, right? Whether you're from Himalaya or you're from South Pole, right? So there's possibility there. So nowadays, a lot of people are actually interested in this kind of gene test. Just a colleague of mine told me that only recently she found out that she was not Taiwanese. She was actually from a special minority called CHOU tribe from Fujian area. Right? Well, as soon as she told me that she was from this tribe, now I see, when I looked at her, she looks totally different now. It's funny, right?
Is this testing only for Chinese, Taiwanese, or
anyone can do this?
Like, so if I went and like, oh, you're this European.
Yeah, well, they can tell you, because this is a very common technique nowadays, right? They have a map, they have a chart.
12,000
So,
T?
what?
12,000 T? Is it
12,000. Yeah.
So it's okay. That's 12,000 like American dollars.
Okay. Does our NHI cover this?
No, you have to pay a separate, privately.
Also, what about the other islands, like Penghu or Lugao?
There aren't any of the Aborigines in Penghu Islands. There could have been, but now there isn't any. There's only on the Yami, on the Orchid Islands you have these. And the other islands, no, we don't.
Can you see like facial differences? Or is,
Well,
or is it so close to the Chinese that you actually
well, even amongst the Chinese, the blood is already really mixed, right?
Yeah.
Like there are so many minority tribes in China. We call it 56 different tribes. But those so-called 56 different tribes was actually the statistics from mainland China's authority, and they consider the Taiwanese Aborigines as one single tribe. So it is not very accurate. Like in the Xinan, the southwest southwest area of China, you have those minorities. For example, people would consider Cantonese, or actually their blood very, very close to those in Vietnam, even their pronunciation. Some are very, very close. And in Yunnan province, for example, we have at least 6, 7 minority tribes. And for the northern Chinese, you think that it should be mainly the Han Chinese, which is not true, because throughout the Chinese history, nomads invaded China, and they left a lot of traces behind. You can check, for example, one very easy indicator will be the Muslim, the Islam religion. Like in northern part of China, a lot of Muslims were there. Actually, in Shandong, in Henan, in Hebei, in Peking, in Shanxi, Shaanxi, you have all these minorities. And it was considered, there was actually several research on mainland China about Jews in China. There were actually a lot of Jews in China, and but nowadays the trace can never be found again. But some of them claim themselves being Jews, right? And as for the Islam, the Muslims, they are more than enough. For example, where my father's from Henan province, in the area there were actually a lot of Muslims there. They look differently. They have greatly, well, basically they have a mustache, they have beard, they look different, their eyes are more in round shape, and they still practice their religion. But the intermarriage between those Muslims and the Han Chinese were very common. So who knows? No. In my blood, perhaps you can find some Hans, you can find some Manchus whatsoever. So I don't think it's possible. We believe that the Han Chinese in the southern area should have more, say, pure blood, but which is not true either. Like as I mentioned, in Fujian province, a lot of Muslims, a lot of Arabians arrived. They settled down and they become Chinese, adopt the Chinese family name, adopt Chinese way of life, and now they even forgot they were actually from Arabian countries. Or, for example, there is a very small town in Xinjiang. People claim themselves being Romans. As for how they arrived, no one knows. And don't forget, Alexander the Great actually arrived in nowadays Afghanistan. And perhaps there was some kind of intermarriage. No one knows. And we all believe that the intermarriage is a great thing because the gene tag can be broadened, right? Otherwise, the pure blood will only cause some problem. And it's a great thing that we are all mishmash. Okay, any other questions? So, again, this is the different map, telling the same thing, the original distribution map here, right? On the coastal area, you can see this, we call them the Pepo or the Pingpu tribe. Like here is Basay, and the Katagalan is actually in the Danshui River. Saisha, Tokas. Well, if judged by this map, then the Aboriginal tribes in Taiwan can be divided into over 20, right? So, but all this kind of categorization has its academical root or base or foundation. First of all, this kind of grouping is based on the linguistic results. and also the anthropological research will also help. So people believe that although we have so many tribes, they were actually from three main resources. One of them actually can be connected with the Indo-China area, like Vietnam, like Laos, like Thailand, or this area. One of the proof would be the pulling of the canine. Right. Some of the tribes, no, not everyone, some of the tribes in Taiwan would pull off the canine as the idea of beauty, right? But why should one tribe pull off have the practice and the other not? Must because of the actually from different origins. And we found that in the Indo-China area, some of the tribes there, they have the same practice. And there is a very interesting thing in some certain tribes. They have beads made of glass, the glass beads. They consider that these beads very precious, which is not produced in Taiwan, and which shouldn't be traded to Taiwan, because if this should come to Taiwan by trade, then most of the, or probably every single tribe will have these kind of beads. But the beads is only found in certain tribe in the middle of this original, in the middle of Taiwan, these central mountains, which means it is actually, they must have brought these beads. Yes.
Beads? What's beads?
The balls, glass balls.
Glass bowls.
Yeah.
Jewelry.
Rose,
Ah.
All right. So people believe that they must have brought these beads with them to Taiwan, and these beads can be found, say, in Malaysia, in Indonesian area. So it explains one of the possible route. And Yami, for example, they speak the same language as some of the Filipino areas, Bataan. And they practice this very similar worship or cultural activities, just like their Filipino cousins. And it is possible that some of the Taiwanese Aboriginal tribes were actually from this area. And during the Japanese colonial time, some of the tribes, or some people were actually driven by the wave, by the typhoon to Taiwan. They were actually from Micronesia, from Hawaiian area. So it was possible that the people actually could reach Taiwan from, say, Micronesia. And this explains the abundance or plurality of the Taiwanese Aborigines. Now think about it, if these should be all originated from Taiwan, there shouldn't be so many different languages. There shouldn't be so many, say, different social as well as political structures. Some of them were actually the patriarchal society, some of them matriarchal society, and some of them have this kind of class society, and some of them, most people were actually equal. So this different structure, different social developments indicate that the Aborigines were actually from different areas. They just met in Taiwan. As for when they arrived Taiwan, we don't know. It's very hard to know. And we always call it this so-called Nandao, South Island language group or linguistic group. Right? There are actually some certain connection between amongst these different languages, but how far they are related to each other, or if they were at all, I'm not able to give you a proper answer. But anyway, what we see here is actually the fact of say in the 19th to 20th century, as soon as the Japanese started to keep records on these people, and Japanese actually carry out proper or thorough investigation in the Aborigines affairs, and they even set up a museum for this purpose. Have you been to Irvine Memorial Park? There is a museum there. The first was established in 1920s by the Japanese. The main function was actually to set up the museum to display the Aborigines, and which was actually very useful for the Japanese colonization, further colonization in the Southeast Asian area, because they believed that the Taiwanese Aborigines were very similar to those in the Philippines, in Malaysia, in Indochina, and in Dutch India. And therefore, they want to study the Taiwanese Aborigines for their further possible colonization in this area. Okay. So we, yes? Yeah.
Sorry, I was just curious when, I know the Japanese categorized the Aborigines into 9 different groups, and I was wondering what year did they have the next 5?
Well, it is bit by bit. It's not a certain year, just sometimes. Well, first of all, the Japanese actually only categorized 2, and then gradually, when the investigation carried out better, and then there will be 8. And then after the Chinese government arrived, then we categorized 9. We call 9 tribes. And for this, the 9 tribes idea lasted for a long time. And as long as the government set up the committee for the Aboriginal affairs, then this kind of movement of give me my own identity back started.
Was CHOU right?
Or earlier, previous to the previous. Yeah.
But that was when CHOU was first officially changed, or officially added the 10.
Yeah. Just this movement. I mean, this movement started because being Aborigines, you can enjoy a lot of privileges, right? And even they changed the law. For example, when the government started giving the privileges to the Aborigines, only those who bear only the father side, the patriarchal principle ruled. Right? So if your mother Aborigines, father Han Chinese, you won't be able to enjoy these privileges. And only in the last, say, 10 years, probably the Taiwanese time, then they changed the law that actually if your mother were actually the Aborigines, you can enjoy the same privileges as the others, which might not be very fair. But anyway, we recognize this principle. And therefore, just I mentioned earlier, that there's a legislator, 立法委员 called Gao Jinsu Mei. Her father is actually Chinese from mainland China, mother Aborigines. So in her first 30 years of her life, she was actually Chinese, Han Chinese. And now she adopted the mother's name, and now became a recognized Aborigine. So the identity changed.
Yeah. Do you know when it was legally changed though?
Pardon?
I know the movement started earlier, but do you know when it was legally changed?
Well, I don't know now the exact figure. If you wish to know, I can check it for you. All right? Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. So as I mentioned, that this movement give me my own identity back is still lasting. So Sedeki, for example, is another another proof that they wanted their own identity. I don't want to be counted as Sao. I want to be counted as Sedeki. Though there was actually no substantial differences between being recognized as Sao or being recognized as Sedeki, but they just felt better this way. And I think the government will actually like to fulfill their wishes to make things easier. So therefore, in different areas, at different periods, you have a different map, right? Each and every single map just shows the different classification, different category of the people here in Taiwan. So this is actually a map showing 13 tribes. Right? And as you see, that at that stage, in army area, there were actually two separate, Tai-Wu-Ge and Kamalan were actually separated from army. There's another one that is not separated yet. So this map will be updated, I think, day by day. Just watch out. Perhaps later we'll have 10,000 different tribes. Who knows, right? But the first records of the originals were actually started in the Dutch colonial area. So we have a lot of books or records left by the Dutch people, and they also their interaction with the Aborigines. Most of the records were actually kept nowadays in Holland, in Leiden, the University of Leiden. They have a center, research center, carrying out research on the Dutch East India Company, and therefore one of the items will be the Taiwanese Aboriginal tribes. Therefore, a lot of Taiwanese scholars actually went to Leiden to work on the Aboriginal activities in the 17th century. They kept a very good record. And here shows, the picture here shows that actually the Chinese of Taiwan, they started also to recording the Taiwanese Aboriginal tribes. For example, this one was actually a painting of 1796 by a Chinese who came to Taiwan to do business, and they just found it interesting of these Aboriginal tribes, because in China, or where they are from, were actually all so-called civilized. And as soon as they see these people here, they call them barbarians, Fan. Right? For the Chinese, if you are not dressed properly, your body is not covered properly, you will be Fan, you will be barbarians. Well, this was of course an outdated idea. Nowadays, to cover yourself up is not a virtue any longer. Okay, but this picture shows the Aborigines hunting for the Sika deer. The Sika deer is actually a special type of deer in Taiwan. As I explained already, that before the Dutch arrival, the Sika deers, the number of Sika deer was actually bigger than the human beings in Taiwan. Right? Taiwan is actually covered by the Sika deer, but the Dutch people precious the skin and the venison and all deer were actually hunted. And as soon as you open up the farmland, the habitat will be influenced, and the number decrease very sharply. Nowadays, the Sika deer is actually an endangered species and should be protected. You see what human beings can do to the mother nature. Okay, this is another idea about the so-called Peipo tribe. As I mentioned, Peipo, this is Taiwanese, Peipo. The first P, Pei is actually the even. Po is actually ground. Even ground means the flat land. Those people who lived on the flatlands mingled with Han Chinese. They will be called the Peipo tribes, or as I mentioned, the civilized barbarians. And they adopted the Chinese way of life. They learned Chinese and moved on to the plains. Some intermarried with the Han Chinese. Most of them forgot their origins. And these Aborigines became known as the Peipo tribes, right? Tribes of the flatlands. Now we have a list here, but certainly the list is never complete. It can never be complete because according to different definition, different people there, they will give you, say, their own identity. But this is actually the most known Peipo tribes. In Kebalan, in Hualien area, Kataglan. Nowadays the street right in front of the presidential office is called Kaidagalan Dadao, in memory of this Katagalan. And I don't think there's any of the tribe left. And Tokas, and Papora, Babuza, well, it's very hard to pronunciate. The last one, the Siraya, is very important because we mentioned about the written system of the Siraya, actually adapted from the Dutch priests using alphabet to write down their language. And just because of this contribution made by the Dutch priests, so we know more about Siraya. We know more about their lives, the way of living, and the history, and their activities. So therefore, the Siraya is actually one of the representative of the Taiwanese Peipo tribes. In Pingtung, for example, that some of them, well, it's a general rule that when people with family name Pan, right, written as the possibility of them being a Peipo is really high, right? But it's not a rule because the Pan is very common Chinese family name. But only the Pan in Taiwan, they are always connected with the Peipo. If you should encounter another family name in Taiwan, Lan, then that's what I said earlier about my colleague. She's actually a minority tribe from the Fujian area, so called CHOU tribe. So the family name is actually a very good indication of where they are actually from. So if you're in Taiwan, you see these family names. First of all, he must be from Changhua area. Must. Right? Secondly, he can be descendants of the Jin tribe from mainland China. Was actually the Nü Zhen of in the Song dynasty. The Jin was actually one of very powerful country and fighting against the Liao and the Song dynasty. Some of their family, or some of the tribesmen around Taiwan, keep this family name Nian. So there's no exception. Okay, that's the painting of the Papal tribes in the 19th centuries. When Western merchants and the missionaries began arriving on Taiwan, they started to doing business with the Papal tribes, and they also started kind of taking interest in these people where they meet, where they met, and therefore some drawings, like the pictures we see here, left behind. So this is actually a woman wearing the Han costume. You see the collar here, the button, and so on. It's typical Han costume. But the turban, or the headdress, is somewhat different. It's not a Chinese habit to wear this kind of turban or headdress. So you can say that they were actually Papal. And it's actually drawn by German merchants. You get Papal Frau. And here is a Papal Knabe, a Papal boy, Papal woman. So they are Papal tribes. And that's actually the picture of a French, I think French merchant. So here you can see that found at enfant, Papal Hans. The picture I think it's by French, showing that this Papal mother and son. Interesting with the headdress, also different to the Han Chinese. And this is actually the Papal household. If you see properly, you can notice that they were actually made of clay. The wall is made of clay, and such roof with the, I think some of them was used with the palm trees, palm leaves, the thatch roof. And you can see that the dress or the living condition is very similar to the Han Chinese. But, right, for some difference, like again, the turban give way, give out the origins. So they were actually Papal tribes in Taiwan. And we mentioned the Siraya, because Siraya get contact with the Dutch people very early, and therefore when the Dutch arrived, they started to write, to record, to hand the Siraya tribes. So we can nowadays we know the Siraya tribe much better just because of the Dutch record. And that's the New Testament in Siraya language that we mentioned. I have shown you this picture already, so you know this story already. And that's the Xingang documents, also practiced or written or kept by the Siraya tribe. But nowadays you should ask anyone if these Siraya tribes, I think no one can answer you because just, especially for the Papals, they became Chinese or became the normal dwellers of Taiwan, first of all. So the impact, the cultural impact on them happened first. So it's almost impossible to differentiate them now. And this is actually a picture taken by the Westerners, showing that the Puyuma in Taiwanese, in Chinese, it's called Beinan, in Taidong area. And the picture shows the stone, which is very important. It's a historical relic, the birthstone of the tribe. They all have different origin, myths of the origins or legend of origin. For example, in some places they believe that they were actually a mixture of a strange hound, dog, and woman. In some places they believed that they were actually the descendants of a brother and sister. So all they have different birth mythology or the birth stories of the origin of the tribe. And I think the anthropologists studied a lot, and they found out that they adapt these stories from each other. So sometimes it's a mixed thing, hard to identify. Shall we take a short break? All right?